much, Alberto and Harm, really, for asking me to do this presentation again, and I apologise for those who heard it yesterday. I was lucky enough to work with Cathrine, Sadolin and Henrik and Kjelin recently on a project, and this is just some of the data we accumulated from this study. And I just wanted to focus particularly on the sort of more extreme vocal effects. What are vocal effects? Well, vocal effects are vocal sounds that are not connected to melody or text. They characterise a singer's expressive style or mood of the song, and they can convey emotion of all sorts. To list them, the ones on the left will be familiar to you. Vibrato is used extensively, particularly in classical music, but popular singers use a lot of vocal breaks, voice breaks, air added to sounds, and screams and creaks, and various ornamentation techniques. But you can use a lot of sort of distortions, distortions and sort of growls and grunting in more extreme music styles. Tuva. Tuva is, I think it's a place in Mongolia, and it's a style of Mongolian singing which I think Tran demonstrated yesterday. And the question is, why can some singers like these get away with it and build a career on sort of really quite extreme voice qualities, which to some people may sound really quite harmful. And others, obviously, if they try these, they get into trouble very quickly. From a singer's perspective, if you actually want to produce these sounds, you've got to know exactly what type of sound you want to produce. I think it's really important to understand how you can produce these effects reliably and consistently. Because if you're going on tour, for instance, you need to be able to do it night after night, and particularly not get yourself into trouble. From a voice professional's point of view, it's very helpful to have some sort of method of assessing the voice and building it up, and then adding in these vocal effects. And Catherine's technique, the complete vocal technique, does that nicely, as long with others. So some of these effects sound so unhealthy. You need to, as I said, be very clear about how they're actually produced, and to ensure that they can actually be produced in a healthy manner. So if someone comes to you and say they want to produce this sort of distortion type sound, if you've no experience with that, potentially you could offer bad advice. The theory behind producing these vocal effects healthily is that you should follow the three basic principles to start with. This is an open throat, good support, and no tightening of the jaw and lips. And in Catherine's work, she thinks it's extremely important to have to use these modes very precisely and correctly. And I'm not going to go into those in great detail, but Cathrine has a workshop on Saturday, and you could learn more about that. It's very important that you can control these techniques specifically for these effects. And the secret, I think, is that the vocal tract is actually used to produce them, and so the vocal folds are not actually being damaged. So if I go into this in a little bit more detail, distortion and rattle. Distortion can be used in all four modes, and it can convey a sort of range of emotions from aggression to devotion. And this is where you go, I'm not a singer, so you have to excuse me, but if you go E and E, and you build in that. And some singers use it repeatedly during their singing for effect. And I think what I'll do today is just show you an example as we go along. This is a picture on the left, which I'll show you in a minute. It's using video stroboscopy with a video scope, and we're looking at the larynx of a singer who is using a sustained note and then adding in distortions through neutral, curving, overdrive and belting. And I want you to look at the signal on the left, which will appear in a minute. There'll be two lines. The top one will be a blue line, and that's the speech signal. But the one underneath it is the laryngograph line, which is the electroglottograph, which are two little electrodes placed over the larynx here. You pass a current between it, and it looks at the the change in the electrical compliance between those, and that gives you a measure of the vocal fold sort of activity. For the first one, you can't really see much activity, but if you look at the ones later on in the example, you'll see that there's very little variation in that, indicating that the vocal folds are vibrating reasonably regularly underneath. There's a little bit of perturbation in both amplitude and frequency. If I just run that now. If you can see that, it's taken very long.
Wait, try to plug it in.
Yeah, when they go, the pulse cords are actually vibrating. And this is different from constricting.
Wait, try to plug it in. And then overdrive. Yeah?
The examples of constriction we saw earlier were that everything just seemed to literally constrict and there was no movement. Here there's a very deliberate, almost relaxation of the false chords, so they are allowed to take part in the vibration. And at the same time, I think there's almost, the vocal folds are almost held apart a little bit, and the false chords are coming in to produce this additional sound effect. So I don't know whether you can see that at all, but the vocal folds underneath were vibrating regularly.